Hey, Bernie Matthews here, and I've never made a video like this before, but I've been doing something I think is kind of cool, developing a technique, and I wanted to put it up there, see if anybody else is experimenting along these lines, see what you guys have been able to come up with and what you think. Okay, so short backstory is, years ago, I started trying to develop a technique mainly for recording guitars. And the idea being that I want to mimic, using multiple microphones, I want to mimic the way your brain focuses on the source of a sound, but using multiple mics to capture the ambience and the tone and all the gloriousness of the situation that you're recording in, but still keep a tight focus on that primary sound source. So that led to a lot of great ideas, a lot of great sounds, a lot of cool stuff. And over the last couple years, I've been trying to translate that into drums and using this technique to focus drum sounds, using all the multiple mics that we use to record drums. Now, a couple weeks ago, I did a session, Sunset Sound Studio 1, where I had a chance to really put this whole thing into practice. It was sort of a classic rock style approach to the music, and I wanted to do that, but I wanted to keep a modern sensibility to the recording. So no better place. Sunset Sound Studio 1, great mic locker, great room, great console, great drummer John Mader with a fantastic sounding kit. Everything came together for me to try this technique, and I want to show you what I came up with. So let's get started. Go over the tracks real quick, show you what's what. Drums, let's go through the drums. I'll just do a real quick overview. Kick drum, D112 in the hole, U47 fed on the back head. Snare is an SM57, clipped to an AKG 415 with a pad, so they're as close to in phase as they can be. The bottom mic on the snare is, again, an AKG 415. The toms are SM57s, and as you can see, I cut out all of the leakage. So it's just the primary hits on the toms, and I don't even carry the sustain. I'll tell you why I do that a little bit later. Hi-hat, KM84, ride, KM84. Both these are sort of just in case mics. Don't use much hi-hat and zero ride. Now the bulk of the drum sound comes from 3 AKG C12A tubes. Cardioid position, they're set up in a semicircle, left, center, and right around the front of the kick. They're equidistant from the snare drum. Used a cable to measure it out. Same height, they're probably about, I don't know, 5 feet, 5.5 feet off the ground, equidistant from the snare. And then finally, the room mics. These are the only mics that I did any kind of processing on. They're a pair of Beyer M20s, ribbon mics. They're set equidistant over the drummers behind the drummer, which is a little bit different from me. I usually put them forward because we had so many musicians in the room. It just made sense. And also it turned out to be a pretty cool choice. They're maybe 8 to 10 feet away from the kit, and so that's the room mics. Again, all these mics are just mic into the Sunset Sound API mic pre into Pro Tools. Pro Tools is at 96 32-bit, and the Beyer, the room mics, are going through an Allen Smart C2. That's the only compression I use to record. So again, this is just a ground zero, and here is, as you can see, no processing at all. This is the naked tracks, and just a little bit of balancing done, and this is what my naked tracks sound like. pretty good. Good basic start. Sounds like a good drum kit. No reverb, no nothing. Okay, so now the technique that I want to talk about. I call it focusing. I'm going to zoom in on that first snare hit. Get really tight in there, okay? Now, as you can see, polarity, the top two is really good. The bottom mic, reverse polarity as you would expect. I reversed it in Pro Tools while we were tracking, but I took that plug-in off, so it's not an issue. Now, here's the cool thing. If you look at the distance from the initial snare hit to the snare hit in the hi-hat, we are looking at a massive 85 samples difference. That's the distance. That's how long it takes the sound to get there. Not quite 96, so we're at 96K, so it's not quite 96, but still audible. You can hear that. Now, if you stretch that to the overheads, bam, 367, or if you look in regular time, we're at 3 milliseconds. So it's getting to be significantly audible. Then you stretch that to the room mics, and now we're double that. We're at 6 milliseconds, okay? So even though everything looks like it's pretty much in polarity, you can see that the distance is 6 milliseconds. That creates an audible flam or phasing, or, you know, people hear it in different ways, but certainly creates audible differences in the primary source of the drum. Okay, so now what I do in this little technique that I've done is I slide the tracks in time and I correct the polarity. So now, this is our leading edge of the snare drum. As you can see, polarity is all correct across all tracks, right? Even the room. And I've time aligned that first hit as well as I can, and you can see the subsequent hits also match up, right? The subsequent waves match up pretty good. Now there's differences because, for instance, this, you can see this is the snare rattle, keeps that, and there's a low frequency hit on the bottom, and so it diverges, but as you can see, it's not that far, right? Okay, so anyway, this is a real quick, just a real quick explanation. It takes a little bit of work and it takes a lot of listening because really just a couple samples difference can make a big difference. So I go through the tracks. The snare is the focus for the room mics, hi-hat, overheads. Okay, the overheads are the gold standard. Everything gets moved to them. And then the kick and the toms get adjusted so that they have their own focus. That's one of the reasons that I cut all the leakage out of the tom mics and just use the initial hit. And plus, like I said, the bulk of my sound is coming from the overheads. That's sort of the sound of the drum kit. And the tight mics are really there just to bring those drums forward, give them a little bit more dynamic attack, more punch. Okay, so now, what does all this sound like? Well, as you can see, mix-wise, there's nothing, no processing. This is naked mics. We have panning, left, center, right, hi-hats hard left, toms, snare and kick and snare up the middle, rooms hard panned. So let's go back to our original I should say my original track. This is tracking day. This is what the original naked tracks sound like for these drums. Not bad, right? Good basic drum sound, great place to start. You can hear all the drums, they got full frequency, ready to be modded, take it in whatever direction the song calls for. Okay, but after focusing, this is what happens. Pretty cool, right? So now I'm going to switch back and forth. Here is the original naked tracks. Like I said, no processing, just balanced, just how it was recorded. Here we go. And here is the focus tracks. And back to the unfocus. And focus. So, pretty cool. You can hear the imaging improves, the kick and snare and toms all come forward. Much punchier, I think. A much better starting place for whatever processing you want to do, wherever you want to take it after that. There's one other thing I think I want to show you that's really cool. And this was my main reason for trying to create this technique. And that is, if you look at the, I'm sorry, let me go back. Make sure, okay, so these are the focus tracks, and I'm going to pull out the room mic and then add it in. And I want you to hear the difference as it goes along. Here it comes. So that's no room mic at all. Now I'm going to bring it up. Now, as you can see, I actually added in quite a bit more, went over the top of how much room mic I would want to add, but you can hear that the drums perspective doesn't change. Your focus remains. Now let me go back and I will do that same thing with the, I'm going to do that same thing with the unfocused tracks. Okay, we'll start off with no room, and then I'll add it in. Now watch what happens when I add in the room. Hear how the drums drift backwards into the soundscape, and the focus becomes much more fuzzy. Anyway, let me know what you guys think of all this, and if you're interested in more techniques that I've been working on. Anyway, Bernie Matthews for Bernie Matthews Audio. Enjoy.